Hey everyone, Scotty here from 4 Wheel Drive DIY. Now, this is the first episode of our history of the Toyota Land Cruiser series. Now, hopefully you guys enjoy it as much as I've enjoyed researching it. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to the Toyota Global website and the Toyota Australia website, as well as many other sources across the web, such as Wikipedia, for giving me the ability to research more about this topic. It was awesome fun researching it. Also, thanks to those who sent in videos, which will be shown later on in the series, those who sent in photos of their rigs, that sort of stuff is awesome. So if you do want to send in more videos and photos, I'll put the link in the video and I'll put a link in the description so you can send in your stuff. Anyways, on to the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Out of all the Toyota lineup at the moment, the Land Cruiser currently has the longest running history of any vehicle in Toyota's lineup. Since the release in 1951 and the advent of the name Land Cruiser in 1955, after the replacement of the BJ, they began the 20 series, which began the name Land Cruiser. It is currently the longest running single series of vehicle that Toyota has ever produced, and in some ways could even be considered one of the longest running vehicles ever produced by any manufacturer in one unbroken line. It's just got some massive history behind it, and it's insane. After the Second World War, inflation was on the rise in Japan. This led to massive difficulties for the Japanese people from all walks of life. In 1949, the United States of America, which had control of Japan at the time after the Second World War, started enacting policies. So these were intended to help stem the rise of inflation. These policies finally kicked in about 1950. They started to actually, cause repairs to the economy, and this enabled a peak of inflation in 1950 and allowed the economy to start turning around. However, a lot of these measures put the Japanese industrial sector under a lot of pressure. So it really was a balancing act, I suppose you could say, between improving the economy but also maintaining the industries, which were also themselves rebuilding after tremendous destruction throughout the war. As part of these problems, Toyota Motor Corporation was hit by a constant series of barrages and problems with the labour unions. This meant that there was constant striking, constant disputes, constant pay disputes, etc., because Japanese workers wanted to be brought up to the same sort of standards as American workers, because they were now exposed to the Western culture, and this really changed the way that Japanese manufacturers and Japanese industries in general did business. And we're going to focus on how Toyota handled this now, how it handled the westernisation of it. In April 1950, there was a large-scale strike from the workers at Toyota. Now this lasted through many talks until July of 1950. Now, this had a very negative impact on the way Toyota did business and managed to bring production down, even to the point where Toyota was only producing a couple of hundred vehicles a month. Now this was insanely terrible for many reasons, because as a vehicle manufacturer they could not be expected to be productive if they're only shipping out a couple of hundred units a month. It doesn't happen. So Toyota was going through a pretty difficult time as a result of the end of the war, and then the labour unions, the strikes and everything was bringing the company down a hell of a lot. Then to make stuff even worse, you'd think the economy couldn't get worse? Well, on the 25th of June 1950, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or North Korea, invaded the Republic of Korea, South Korea, and started the Korean War. And as we all know, those of us who have picked up a history book know what happened in the Korean War. It's technically still going, but it was a big thing. And I can't stress this enough. It put industries all around the world under tremendous pressure, as war generally does. These industries had only just recovered, or were still recovering, from the Second World War. So to suddenly be thrown into another war with a lot of major powers contributing to it on both sides, it was a big deal. However, this big deal soon became an upside in some ways to Japanese industry. The United States was contributing a hell of a lot to the war, and as a result, their supply lines from the mainland United States or the continental United States were overstretched to try and get everything there, especially because they started to bring a big downturn after the Second World War in downsizing their military. They weren't expecting to get into a major conflict that quickly after the war. They were still reeling from the tremendous strain that the Second World War had put on the United States. So they realised very quickly that having placement in Japan could have really helped them. And it could have allowed them to shorten their supply lines and give them a stepping stone into the theatre. Soon, the United States military began talks with Japanese vehicle manufacturers to develop military trucks, four-wheel drives, pickups, everything else to help support the effort of the United States in the Korean War. In conjunction at this time, the National Police Reserve Forces, which was later to become the Japanese Self-Defense Forces, was being equipped with weapons and equipment by the United States military. This was not going to continue to be a constant and continuing agreement. It was intended as a, we will set you up and then you have to supply for yourself. So, obviously the Japanese military had been completely disarmed at the end of the Second World War and they were in the process of rebuilding and rebranding. So, it was no longer the Japanese military, it was the Japanese Self-Defense Force, but it was going under the name of the National Police Reserve Force. Now, just remember, the National Police Reserve Force is different from the National Police Force. So that will come up later. So you just got to keep in mind that at this time in Japan, there were many different factors involved. It is a big picture thing. And the Land Cruiser could not have existed without the bigger picture around it. And what was going on, you've got to understand the time and what was going on in the country to be able to understand what society was like and how this sort of thing was developed and brought to be. One of the main interests to many government agencies in Japan at the time was the Willys Jeep, or a vehicle similar to the Willys Jeep. They wanted something that was as capable, however, they realised that bringing in these vehicles from America was not going to be a lasting state of affairs. And they also realised that to bolster their local manufacturing, they needed to be able to produce a similar vehicle locally. Now, as a result of this, Toyota jumped on the idea. With the Korean War happening and the ability to provide the United States with vehicles and equipment, and the Japanese government looking for vehicles and equipment, Toyota was very quick to the table with their design and development of this. So by August 1950, they already started designing a prototype four-wheel drive light truck, which they had ready and in testing by January 1951. Now, this was an insane amount of work and effort that went into this to get this whole thing developed in this time. The prototype that Toyota brought to the table was a water-cooled inline-six B-type petrol engine powered vehicle. It had the capacity of 3,386 cubic centimetres and was mounted to an SB Type 1 ton truck chassis. Now, this vehicle was laughed at by a few people. They wondered why you would mount a truck motor to a 1 ton truck chassis. The motor was originally designed for a 4-ton truck, which meant that the B-type petrol motor was actually a pretty capable and pretty powerful motor for the time. Like by modern standards, it's nothing. But back then, this motor was actually pretty damn capable and was a pretty powerful motor for its size, capacity, and everything. So Toyota had taken a 4-ton truck motor and thrown in a 1-ton truck body, which meant given the competition at the time was still running smaller, underpowered motors, Toyota had a big leg up in this realm. They were able to bring to the table a more powerful vehicle which was more capable than what the competition was bringing in. Now, thanks to the Second World War, the name Jeep had become synonymous. At this point, and at this time in history, Jeep was not exactly a brand name. It was the nickname given to the vehicle by soldiers in the Second World War and had been adopted by the Willys Corporation, which produced civilian variants of the vehicle after the war. Any four-wheel drive vehicle was called a Jeep. And to some degree these days they're still called a Jeep. Now, because the vehicle had a B-Series motor and was traditionally known as a Jeep, Toyota called it the B-Series Jeep, or the Toyota VJ for short.